Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this hybrid meeting of Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny. Just before we start, a few housekeeping notes. So this is a formal meeting of Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee. It's held partly by Teams and partly live. Please note that this meeting of the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcasts and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live and subsequent broadcasts by members of the public, although ultimate decision on this matter lies with the Chair in case of disruption. Please, could everybody present obey these following ground rules. Only speak when invited to by the Chair. If accessing via Teams, always turn your video function on when invited to speak and state your name. Please use your microphone when speaking in person, and please mute and turn off your microphone when you're not talking. If accessing via Teams and would like to speak on an item, please do so by utilising the raise your hand feature on the bottom top of the Teams window. In fact, it will be very useful for me if members who are here in person could do the same, because that will help me get people in order for speaking. If a vote is required on any issue, the Democratic Services Officer will call out each committee member by name in turn, starting with the Chair and Vice Chair, and please respond for and against or abstain. This, of course, will be different for item 3 and 4, which will be a secret ballot if required. For those people in the room, please notice that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by the way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the ground floor and the multi-storey car park. For those of you at home, you know your own way out. Please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. First of all, I'd just like to say a couple of hellos and goodbyes. I'd like to thank Susan Phillips, who's been part of this meeting for the last 2 years, who's no longer a member of the committee, and I'd like to welcome Sean Gabriel as a new member to the committee. I've got 2 apologies for item 1. Nick Geary and Roberta Rocco have sent their apologies, and I've got a sort of partial apology from Beverly Dunlop, who I think is going to be joining us via Teams rather than in person. Do we have any other apologies?
No, Chair, no other apologies.
So substitute members, we've got Paul Hilliard. You're very welcome, Paul, and Derek Borthwick. Very welcome. I think you've joined us before, Paul, haven't you? So, and Derek, I thought you'd joined the children's one before. No. So in that case, you're very welcome. I've met you somewhere on a children's thing at some point, I know. So no other substitutes. So item 3 is election of chair. So I'm seeking nominations for the election of chair. So any nominations will need to be seconded. So do we have any nominations for chair? Yes. Councillor Hilliard.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to nominate yourself, Richard Burton. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Do we have a seconder?
Yeah, I would like to second. I would also say I raised my hand as you told me, and you've ignored me.
In that case, I must apologise. I seem to be overloaded with technology. So thank you. You're happy to second. Any other nominations? No. In that case, we don't need to go to a vote on that one. So I shan't force anybody to give a speech to nominate the chair, although I'm slightly disappointed. So item 4 is election of vice chair. Do we have any nominations for vice chair? I'm just looking for showing participants. That will help me, won't it? Councillor Sandra Moore.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I propose Councillor Lisa Lewis?
Right, thank you. And I will second Councillor Lewis from the chair. Do we have any further nominations for the vice chair? No, I'm not seeing any more. In that case, congratulations, Vice Chair.
Thank you. I'll be happy to accept.
Item 5, declaration of interest. Do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interests or any other local interests for any items on the agenda? No, in that case we can leave that. Item 6, minutes. I hope you all had a chance to have a look at the minutes. Any issues, or can we take those as read? Yeah. Okay. There's item 6. Public issues. Sorry, action sheet. Any comments on the action sheet at all? There's a few items still on there, but they all seem to be in progress. Yeah. Okay, public issues. I've got no public issues. No. So in that case, rapidly on to item 8. This is the Youth Justice Service. The Youth Justice Service Youth Justice Plan. It's on page 21, by the way, if we're using it electronically. So this item is going to Cabinet and has therefore been brought to us, this committee. What I asked to do, because this meeting is actually quite full, and my feeling was that, that there's a piece of some data on here which is slightly out of date now, what I asked to do is get it emailed out to members of the committee, which I know you all received, and asked for feedback on it. I haven't received any feedback. Just to reassure you that this item is going to come back to us in 6 months' time with some fresh data. So if we're all happy, I would just recommend that we pass that on, and no dissent. Right. So we go to item 9, expansion of Longspeed Special School and Bournemouth Learning Centre. It's on page 61 if we're looking electronically. This project is already well known to the committee. We've looked at it before, and we're generally in favour of this project and its aspirations, ensure that our children get high quality education within their community, and it's already underway. The reason it's been brought back to the committee is that the project has produced a significant overspend, which we have some concerns about, and this overspend was sanctioned by the Chief Executive under the special powers, and therefore had to pass through Overview and Scrutiny Board, and I was invited to attend that. Personally, I feel that the overspend can be split into 3 areas. One, more money was spent because of more number of pupils who are expected to go to the school. Secondly, there's an improvement in the facilities, and thirdly, some complications in the building structure. Now, what I've done is invited Councillor Stephen Bartlett, as a chair of Overview and Scrutiny Board, to attend this meeting, because I know he may well have some questions and may help us on this. I'd like to welcome Kim Burton, who's the School Estates Development Team Leader, to present the report and advise the committee. Sorry, I've done that. Kim Burton, over to you.
Chair, it's Elaine Reddin here. It's actually Terry Reynolds, not Kim Burton. So apologies if that message hadn't reached you.
All right, in that case, Terry Reynolds now, I've got you down later as also Terry, and I don't have your official title down, so perhaps you could start by giving me your official title. That'd be great.
Yes, Chair. So my official title is Education Consultant, and I'm working for the professional leadership of Children's Services to support the leadership of Children's Services while the appointment of a substantive Director of Education takes place. So that's my role, to pick up those things. So, Chair, the report that you've had summarises the what has happened recently with the Bournemouth Learning Centre. Our current information as of today is that the project is completely on track and within the revised budget, and that the school is expected to open on time, transferred to the school late July for setting up, and will open in September. But you've seen the report, and as you've said, Chair, members will be familiar with the story of this. So I'll stop there and just take any questions, I think.
Okay, well, if I can just start with a question, just to be clear with Mike, because I did say that I see it like it's three strands to this overspend. Can you share with us about where the money on these three strands are? Because just to repeat what I said, some money has been spent to increase the capacity. Some money has been spent to improve the facility, in specific areas, I believe, and some money has been spent due to structure of the building needing more work than was anticipated. So is it possible to give me some indication of where that money went?
I can't disaggregate into those three streams, Chair, where the additional money has gone. But I think you're right that there were three particular elements that led to that overspend. The fourth element I would suggest is that the initial identification of a cost of only £500,000 for that was optimistic, pending a proper survey and review of what the costs would be. And it was that survey that revealed that in order to complete the project for the number of pupils required, it was going to cost more money. So there would have been a substantial cost even with 12 pupils, because a number of the works are necessary, whatever, but the expansion contributed to that, and some of the discoveries in preparing for the build also contributed.
Thank you. Any other members of the committee would like to ask any questions? No, I'm not seeing any more hands raised, actually. Oh, okay, I have. Okay, Councillor Jane.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reynolds. How the initial 12 pupils who have already moved in, how they're settling down, and is the ongoing building work on the other part of the building proving, a problem at all, or is it all fine for them?
The report of the school is that the pupils have settled in well. Obviously, it's their first term in the new provision and the new school, and for lots of pupils, the return to school has had elements of stress after the lockdown period and disrupted schooling, but the school is saying that they are happy with the way things are going. There are no significant problems, no problems that you wouldn't anticipate with any group of pupils returning to school after the interrupted schooling that they've had.
Thank you very much. That's good to hear.
Thank you. Do you want to follow that up at all, Jane, or you're happy with that? Yes. Looking for anybody else who's a little want to raise a hand. Okay. Well, okay. Stephen Bartlett, Councillor Bartlett, you were next.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Okay, well, I've got a couple of questions, but I'd just like to go back just a little bit to the outset of the project, which I think started in around, well, as far as the overview scrutiny process was concerned, in about June of 2020, where the paper gave an outline of the project and where the costs were allocated, which were then subsequently passed on to Cabinet for approval in June. I have to say that, the project was really well received. It was a great idea, and is in fact proving to be a great idea. I'm sure it's going to be very successful. But of course, as we all know, that in the April of this year, we were sort of taken aback by the revelation that the project cost had increased by somewhere around 150%. This was really quite a shock. There had been no indication that prior to that the initial cost, or it wasn't indeed an initial cost. You know, it was the project cost, and that's what we were told, and that's what was approved by the cabinet. So we subsequently got an increase in the project costs, and it was at very short notice, and actually only probably about 2 weeks before the school was due to open. So it was a bit of a surprise. In fact, such a surprise that the cabinet had to actually recommend the chief executive to sign off the approval for the budget under his emergency powers. But nevertheless, you know, it was deemed still a very good project, and one that was of value, so it was approved. And as you know, the work has just continued. From an overview and scrutiny perspective, you know, there was a substantial increase in the budget, and one that I felt should be explored. And in fact, this was agreed at the cabinet by the leader of the council, who understood the questions that obviously arose because of the increase in the project costs. And I think portfolio holder Nicola Green echoed those concerns at the time as well. And so what we said was, yes, it sounds a great project, but we do need to look at it from a project management perspective, and that I did in fact undertake to bring it back to the overview of scrutiny board in May of this year. However, it then subsequently materialised that this particular committee had also had an interest in this project earlier, and indeed wanted to look at it themselves. So rather than look at it in two separate meetings, we agreed to look at it under this committee tonight. So having said all of that, I'm slightly surprised that the paper presented to the cabinet on the 14th of April has not been presented, because indeed we cannot scrutinise all of those reasons for bringing it to scrutiny because the paper has not been presented. So I'm at a loss really to understand how we can even scrutinise those issues when we don't have the paper in front of us, and members of this committee will have not had a chance to actually read the paper with all the information, incidentally, that we've been talking about already. The breakdown of all the costs was in that paper, quite clear. So, I'm not quite sure where we can go with this in terms of overview and scrutiny. But what I can say is, having looked around the school only last evening, I am extremely impressed with the project. And there's unquestionably going to be a fantastic asset for the children. I do not have any questions regarding value for money. In fact, I would say we're going to get absolutely tremendous value for money from the project. The quality of the work is really good, and it looks as if it's going to be ready. And as the 12 students are already in the school as committed to, and so it looks like the project will be finished on time. But I was sort of taken aback by the extent of the work that's going on there. And I think the very first paper that we got on what was required really understated what would be required. So I'm not surprised at the costs. And in fact, I think we're getting an absolute bargain. So I have no problems whatsoever with the costs. What I do have a problem with is the way this project sort of was launched and then communicated, and the project management of it. And it's a great shame really, because this is a great idea. You cannot question the logic of it, and it's going to be a huge value to the service. So having said all of that, where do we go with in terms of looking at what for me now remain the issues about the launch of the project, how the estimates were prepared, how the agreements between the various parties were reached, and in particular, I would say the funding agreement between BCP and the Ambitions Trust. Is that actually signed? When was it signed? If it has been signed, when was it signed? Because that should have clarified exactly where the cost lay, and we wouldn't be having this discussion now. So probably two questions, I guess. Why aren't we looking at the paper that would have given us all the information we need to scrutinise this? And two, has the agreement, the funding agreement, actually been signed? So in terms of overview and scrutiny, you know, because I don't have any concerns about the value for money on this project, I'm not sure that there's any real value in taking this forward any further with the overview and scrutiny board. But I have to say that I am really tempted, in the absence of that paper being presented today, I'm actually tempted to put it on the overview and scrutiny board at its next meeting in July. But I haven't made my mind up on that, and I would have to consult with the vice chair anyway. So anyway, just those two points, if somebody could answer those, and then I'll be quiet. Thank you.
Thank you. I noticed, Nicola, you've raised your hand. Do you want to come in on that at all?
I can't hear you, Nicola.
So you see if you're on mute, Nicola.
Somebody had to do it. Apologies. Good evening, members. If I may, Chairman, I just wanted to acknowledge, I think, the concerns that Councillor Bartlett, while he hasn't exactly called this, but it's around the governance of capital of projects. Now, he and I both know this building very well, and I'm very grateful for his support for the project. But I think he and I probably had the same feeling when we saw what might be achieved for the original budget. So this right sizing, while it has been significant, has been completely necessary. And I know there are some specific questions that he wants answered by the officers, so I won't seek to answer those currently. But what is being delivered now is a really good facility at really good value for money with appropriate programme management in. And I think that was perhaps a conversation that we wouldn't have been able to have in the earliest stages, because work still had to be done. Of course, there were ongoing issues around COVID and access of the buildings, but those are for others who were there to discuss in more detail. But it is, I think, appropriate to give members of this board and also of the panel which Councillor Bartlett chairs some assurance of the process that's involved now. So alongside this particular capital project, you'll be aware of the ongoing overspend and high needs block of the dedicated schools grant. That overspend and the ongoing pressures now has its own governance board, which is meets 6 weekly, is chaired by the chief executive, has representations from schools via the schools forum, and as you would expect, the leader of the council, myself as the portfolio holder, Elaine as Director of Children's Services, and the appropriate finance officers as well. So that's overseeing the, if you like it from the finance point of view. Feeding into that is a schools capital board, which has had its first meeting, and that's the way through which these projects will now be addressed. And so there will be, I hope, a much more transparent and clear line of sight. And clearly, Councillor Bartlett, I'm not quite sure of the format, but as you would expect, that board will feed it, the work of that board will inform the quarterly budget monitoring, and as we look to develop the medium-term financial plan as that's developed. And clearly that is something which will come to your panel in due course, and you will, that panel will then decide where it needs to look into that work. So the governance and the project management is there, I think, which I hope will give you some assurance. We had that meeting today, and Mr. Reynolds has already given some of the feedback about that. I think he'll probably be able to answer your direct question about the discussions with the Academies Trust. And I'm sorry, I'm puzzled because I think the report you're referring to is the Cabinet one. In terms of the finance, and I have that open. Never is the BLC discussed when I haven't gone back to the Cabinet report. So I don't know. It's probably too late to circulate it now, but it's visible, it's available, and it's very familiar to some of us. So again, I don't know quite, Chairman, how you'd like to take that forward. But those figures have been available for some time now. I'm happy to respond to any further questions, but thank you for the opportunity to set out where I think we might be.
Right, thank you very much for that, Nicola. There was another officer that raised their hand for a moment, but it disappeared. Was anybody else from the officers wanted to add to that? Yeah, Terry. Yeah, it was you. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. I wanted to respond to the questions about how we got where we are, and what I have to say is that I'm not completely sure about how we got where we are, because this has developed over a period of time, and I wasn't imposed all the way. I'm familiar with some aspects of the history of this, but I think Councillor Bartlett was absolutely right to pick two key points. I think the provision is very necessary in the context of BCP's SEND strategy, and it's undoubtedly, on any benchmarking that's been produced by central government and the local government association, it's undoubtedly value for money, but it should never have been in the position where that was a surprise and the figures were as they were. So as Councillor Green has said, the key thing that has been done in order to prevent this happening again is actually to put some much stronger governance arrangements in place over all of the capital projects, so that we are completely sighted on them all the way along, on what their progress is and what the costs are, and any problems when they arise can be surfaced very quickly for remediation and decision, because it is a sorry state, as Councillor Bartlett has said, for the cost to increase 150%, even if it does still represent value for money.
Thank you very much for that. Now, I noticed Derek Borthwick, Councillor Borthwick, you had raised your hand. Did you?
I did raise my hand,
Yeah.
but Councillor Bartlett covered the overspend and the justification of it.
In that case, Fiz, you were next.
Yeah, my question was on a different matter, so.
Okay.
Okay.
Stephen, you've raised your hand again. Do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, it was just my question about the funding agreement. It's just basically the contract between the academy and the council in regards to the fees, and it should have been signed and agreed probably at the start of the project. But I just want to make sure that it's now signed and agreed, or if not, when is it going to be signed? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Councillor, I didn't respond to that bit. The funding agreement is in process. It hasn't been signed because there are a number of issues with the lease to be finalised after the project is completed. So it can't be signed until the ambitions are happy with the condition of the building, and then we can sign the agreement.
I'm sorry, can I come back on that, please, Chair?
Yeah, I'm just going to say, are you happy with that? Would you like to come back with that, Stephen?
Yeah, I'd like to come back. I mean, one of the reasons for the agreement is to ensure that costs are contained within it during the project, and also delivery schedule, of course, as well, because if it's not completed on time, there is a mechanism within the agreement for the council to get its money back. So, you know, in theory, this agreement should be in place. So I'm a bit concerned that it's not in place. But, you know, I'll let the legal people worry about that. That's not within my gambit, really. But I'm just a bit surprised. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Fiz, a new point.
New point. Yes, it was just an inquiry about renewable energy, and whether there was whether you know of anything that was done in this particular school with regards to renewable energy whilst you've been sort of adjusting it, given the climate crisis.
Okay, I don't know whether is that information that you would have to hand, or would you need to come back on that out of the meeting?
Yeah, it may have been. It may have been. I don't know the school. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Chair, I wouldn't have that information, but I can find out and write to the clerk if you wish to include a note.
Well, I'm having other members of the committee shouting at me, telling me that it's eco-friendly anyway. So from the previous report. So hopefully that wouldn't be too much of a task for you.
Yeah, I suppose it would just be useful to have it noted, because it's important to be thinking about it in everything we do, isn't it? So especially if it has had measures done, then that's really useful.
So thank you. You're okay with that?
Yeah.
Eddie, your hand is raised.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I was just thinking, do you need a recommendation to move this forward? If so, I'm happy to make one.
That's sort of where I was going next, because I do feel that we've because my feeling is are we happy with where we're at, or do we need any more work doing on this? So I'm quite happy to take a recommendation, Eddie.
Right, well, I'm quite happy to recommend that to move this forward, as we've heard from the officers and other councillors, that it goes back to the relevant boards and cabinet to move this forward, and then they can sign it off and do the respective work that needs to be done. But in light of not having the other paperwork, which we should have had, we don't want to come back, and I think we need to move this forward. So I'm quite happy to put those sort of words forward.
Well, it's my thoughts. So we've got two possibilities, well, three possibilities here, haven't we? We either say yes, we're all happy with it right now. We say we're not happy with it right now, and we'd like it to come back with the children's with some more work done on it, or we say that ONS board would like to take it on to look at it from their perspective. So that's the sort of three options I see. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that? Sandra, you've raised your hand and nodded at me.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, you've given three options. There would be possibility of a fourth. It could possibly be referred to A&G. Would there be any mileage in that, do you think?
My thoughts on that is that A&G would need some more work and recommendations from us first. That therefore, if it was to come back to either us or the ONS board, it could then get referred to A&G from there. That is my feeling on it. I don't know if anybody else has got any thoughts.
Chair,
Sean, you had your hand up next.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure this has been covered before. Could we look at the actual governance of future capital educational expenditure? Because obviously there seems to be some issue of overspends, which occasionally in whatever walks of life have encountered. Is that something for this committee to consider, or would that go to ONS? I know that the Councillor Green's already spoken about there's been some extra governance measures put in. Would it be worth us looking at what those measures are and the detail behind that?
My feeling is that there's definite possibility, because if this is a one-off, it's not quite such a worry. But if it's a general trend, it would be. Jane, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. I feel that from the point of view of this board, and we are looking at things from the children's point of view, and the benefit to them, we need to, you know, get this finished and built and as many children in there as we can, because they need further spaces to be available for them. As Councillor Bartlett has pointed out, he's more concerned with the finance side of things and the governance of that finance and, you know, kind of what happened and why we're here. And perhaps that is more suitable for his board than it is for us. Our main preoccupation must be the benefit of those children, I feel. So I'm happy for it to carry on from here.
Right, so thank you for that, Jane. Elaine, I've noticed you've raised your hand.
I'm not wishing to add to the list of options, but I'm wondering if we, and the benefit of hindsight, which is an exact science, if we have an opportunity to come back to children's ONS when the project is completed in September. I think the challenge is right in terms of we need to stick to budget. We need to make sure that it does furnish the 54 places. And I know that there's some visits, and I'm grateful, Councillor Bartlett, for you finding the time to go and visit, and you were as inspired as I was and others when we visited previously. So I think that might be a way of offering assurance, but also going back to the point around children and young people. You know, we can actually report on the impact and the so what. I mean, we have got an acoustics arrangement in this facility that is unrecognisable anywhere else across the conurbation, and wouldn't it be lovely for us to be able to report back the impact for the children? So I would propose a short paper that addresses the issues of project management, spend, and is it open, and are the 54 places all taken up? And that would be September, Chair.
Thank you very much for that suggestion. I'm pleased that your suggestion wasn't was all going to have a chip in here. That was my worry at that point. Councillor Stephen Bartlett, you've raised your hand as well.
Microphone. Yeah, I mean, Overview and Scrutiny Board may wish to make its own decision regarding this matter. I think it's a good idea that from a services perspective that you review the project at its end. As I said before, I think the concern that the Overview and Scrutiny Board has got much more to do with the way the initial project was launched and the way that the budgeting, etc. And as Councillor Green said, you know, that we will be monitoring the project costs routinely on other capital as part of the routine Overview and Scrutiny Board function. So I don't think it's just my opinion that you necessarily would have to concern yourself as a committee too much with those aspects, because they will be addressed routinely. But certainly from the the completion of the project and what you've now got in terms of the offering and the brilliant that is going to be for the service, that's something that you probably want to look at. So, you know, if you wanted a suggestion from me, it would be maybe for you to suggest that the Overview and Scrutiny Board may wish to consider the paper that was presented earlier to the Cabinet back in April, which is what, you know, I mean, we will take a view on that anyway, to be fair. So, you know, that's for what it's worth. That would be my thoughts on it. Thank you.
So I feel that we have a sort of general feeling here is that we'd like it to come back to us to look at the effect on the children and the running of the school in the autumn. I would say that I know I'm going to do a visit to the school as well soon when it's actually working and teaching. So I feel that our committee are quite happy in that. I feel that Stephen was saying that he wants to keep the option open to take it back to the ONS board and have a think about that. Am I missing anything here? Everybody happy with that? Yeah. Okay, in that case, I think that's what we'll do. Add it to the forward plan for that. I don't feel the need to sum up a huge amount after that, because we've had quite a discussion, and I think it might take me 20 minutes to sum up, and we do feel we need to move on, but we have an outcome anyway. So the next item is item 10, which is Children's Services Improvement Journey Update. It's on page 67 if we're looking at it. sorry, Councillor Rice, Fizz.
Sorry, just before you move on, I'm just hearing about a couple of councillors that have been on a tour, and I would also love to go on a tour of the school if that was possible.
I'm very happy to take that offline because it is about numbers and making sure that the you know, we do it in a sensitive way. But I'm very happy to contact you offline if that's helpful.
Yeah, I think that would be very, very helpful. So I think the offer is there. If people want to take up the offer, we'll have to do it in dribs and drabs because I don't think we all need to turn up one day because we might overwhelm the children, or the children may overwhelm us, which is more likely. Well, thank you for that offer. So in that case, we'll move on to item 10, the Children's Service Improvement Journey, which is on page 67. So we received an overview report on progress at the last meeting on the 29th of March, when we requested to see a performance information so that we could assess the progress being made. We're looking for thoughts and recommendations from this committee so that any points and suggestions can be built to the next stages. I believe Anthony Douglas, who's from the DFE Improvement Advisor, and Elaine Redding, our Interim Corporate Director, are going to do their standard double act on this, like that they did last time. I don't know who is going to start. I'll pass it over to you to decide.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to hand to Anthony to set context because it is a milestone moment in terms of the 6-month that challenge that Anthony set us as the DFE advisor back in obviously 6 months ago. So Anthony, can I hand over to you to tell us where we were there and where we are now?
Thanks, Elaine, and good evening, councillors and others in the meeting. At your last meeting, you asked us to produce a more technical report. So what you have today is the overview report from Elaine and myself about progress, which I'll summarise in a sec, but also some appendices which are quite detailed. The first is what we call the key performance obsessions. These are the 7 areas of improvement which I deem to be, with Elaine, essential if BCP was to improve services and for everyone to stop being so concerned. And those 7 areas are management oversight, an open and inclusive culture, transforming particular services, child-centeredness as a culture, practice leadership, making systems stronger, and through that to make sure the work every day was safe. And the gratifying part of that is we've made progress on all aspects of that action plan and those obsessions. You also have 15 position statements. Apologies if it's overkill, but you did want the detail, and it's important, I think, for any overview and scrutiny committee to have the detail to get their teeth into. So the 15 position statements are the 15 areas in the action plan demanded of us by Ofsted, but also which we ourselves felt needed to be put into place. And all of those 15 areas, some are doing better than others, but all are making progress. So you've got the performance obsessions, the 15 position statements, and the overview report. In short, the 6-month stocktake has found that the early promise has started to translate into improvements for individual children and young people. That was a crucial bridge that had to be crossed. It was important to put the building blocks in place, but pretty useless if it didn't make much of a difference to people on the ground. It's been an incredibly intensive period, and as with every improvement programme, it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But that's better than 1 step forward and 2 steps back. So I'd probably just stop at that point because we could go through a lot more detail, but in the spirit of a busy agenda and what you asked for. Perhaps Elaine might have some points to add, or you may have some questions of us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Elaine, would you like to take up that offer to add anything?
No, I'm very happy to take questions from ONS, which is what you've done while we finish you with all of the detail.
Right, thank you. I mean, I've got a few questions, so if I kick off and then I'll pass it over to other people to, I mean, the first thing, on page 68, paragraph 4, some practice good to outstanding. So first I'd like to recognise that and ask you to pass on thanks from this committee for that. But it says that some service remains in need of transformation. Can you unpick this a little and highlight what's hampering that?
It's purely a question of time. It's often about the focus, which isn't sufficiently child-centred. The needs of children don't run through every single conversation, every single process. That takes time to put into place. But what I've tried to show, particularly in the holding to account meetings, which are held fortnightly with different accountable officers, is that crucially, the amount of poor or inadequate work has reduced significantly. And that's as a result of intensive input, intensive practice reviewing, changes in staffing. It's a whole range of factors, but it will just take time. But what we were trying to convey was that BCP has got to the important first base, that the services are safe. You can never say that 100% in the nature of what everybody does. It's high profile, high risk work. You can never get it right every time, but the amount of unsafe work has been dramatically reduced, and that's critical. I'd say in another 6 to 9 months, then the service has a chance of being somewhere close to assessment as good, although probably the full journey to that is more like 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, I mean, that was actually going to be my last question, is asking you to predict the length of time on the journey. So thank you for answering that one nice and early. Sandra, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The report mentions the need for staff stability, that recruitment and retention is fragile, and clearly I do understand the problems involved. But I wonder if we could have an update on that. Is the situation still fragile? Thank you.
Shall I answer that? Because so Councillor Moore, I think it's less fragile. An unintended consequence of COVID has meant that we've had interest in working in the area because there is a hybrid approach to managing the work. So we hoped that would be the case, and we've also got some initiatives going on in BCP which are unique. So that's attracting colleagues' interest, particularly colleagues that want to be part of our improvement journey. So in terms of the management tiers, we've done very well on recruitment, Councillor Moore. In terms of experienced social workers, we do face the same challenges as any other local authority, but we have been able to increase the take up. That's partly to do with the recruitment and retention payment that was supported back last year from colleagues, but also as I say, the flexibility. But I am currently looking with the service at what do we want to do with the next iteration of our workforce planning in terms of AYSEs, and then AYSEs that are 1 year post qualified, and do we now, because we have got the green shoots of coming out of the position we were in last year, then we can take a few more calculated risks with the makeup of our workforce. So forgive me if that's a long-winded response, but I think it's not as straightforward as a yes and no. So I hope, Councillor Moore, you recognise what I've said, but I'm very happy to take follow-up.
Yeah, just before we do, you use an acronym there. Do you think you could just?
Oh, did I? Sorry, Chair. Yeah. Where? What did I say? AYSEs.
That's right, yes.
Yeah, so they are social work students in old money, Chair.
Right, okay, so just so that everybody is clear. Sandra, do you want to follow up at all? Lisa, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. My question refers to the inclusion practices in BCP schools. It's page 70, number 11. So I was just wondering, because when you say that some schools need more support with their inclusion regimes, how open to support are they, and how much influence do we have?
I'll hand over to Anthony because he's just been doing a piece of work supported by Councillor Green, myself and the Regional Schools Commissioner. So Anthony.
Well, I think it's a question of, as the overall Children's Services improvement journey was about stronger leadership and management, I think this is about the leadership and management of inclusion by the council and every single school and the college. We wanted to see inclusion given the same status as results and safeguarding, and that will take a different approach, a different relationship between schools with each other and with the local authority. There are currently some schools who don't take their fair share of schools of children with complex needs, and others who do, which is good for those children, but not really acceptable. Inclusion is everybody's business, and of course, with academy trusts, you can't tell a school what to do. You can to a certain extent, but they may well appeal you. You have to do it through leadership, consensus, collaboration, and joint ownership of the issues. And I hope through the inquiry we've been carrying out, we'll be able to get over the stories of some of the children involved and the consequences of not including them fully. So, no, we can't instruct anybody these days, but we can influence, and it's a leadership challenge which the new Director of Education, starting next Monday, and working with Elaine, that'll be top of their work programme.
Thank you. Do you want to follow up at all with that?
Not really, thank you. I was just thinking that, you know, with most of the schools, 95% or so being academies now, I guess we just don't have so much influence, and, you know, we can't really, if they decide not to take somebody, I guess that's just the way it goes.
Well, I don't think that's, I think that is how it's been working in practice, but I don't think that's how it has to be. I think there is a leadership option that's a collegiate leadership with MATs and single trusts that do take responsibility for children and young people with complex needs in BCP. It's not good enough to evade that. And I do think those schools have been partly let off the hook, but also that we haven't had a strong enough dialogue with them to have common purpose. I think there's work to be done. It won't be easy, but I do think there could be an opportunity through collaborative leadership.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. I mean, I know I was also highlighted exactly that I've highlighted the term needs more support, because that's quite a euphemism used for all sorts of things, and looking at the support that might be going in place, and would we like to have any sight of the work that's being done in the future?
Very much so, yes. We're going to be completing, we're still seeing people, there are still submissions coming in, but certainly hoping to complete by the end of June. That will be a report for Elaine in the first instance, but I'm sure it will inevitably find its way here as part of a plan over the coming months, which needs to be worked out both as an engagement plan, a communications plan, an action plan, and a scrutiny plan.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Sean, you've got your hand up next. So before I move on, I forgot to say that we tend to use first names in children's webinars, so I hope you're happy with that.
Hi, thanks, Chair. It's a question for Anthony. We were talking about working and encouraging the academies to be more inclusive, and you mentioned leadership. Have you got any practical examples that you've experienced of leadership, how that's encouraged academies to be more inclusive? So I know it can be difficult. I know we're on a sticky wicket, and perhaps our influence is limited on academies at the moment, but I wonder how we can actually do that in practice.
Well, certainly what we've been seeing, without going into the details of individual children, is some stunning practice where they, an academy trust has gone the extra mile to keep a child or take a child with great difficulty, and as good as maintained schools, no difference. And others where my own personal view is more could have been done, but it's a complicated matter because the support, it does take a team around the most complex child to keep them in mainstream education, but that has got to be the council's strategy. You've talked about the spend on the high needs block. There have been some good investments in mainstream plus resource bases, and the next couple of years will be crucial. The decisions about what little money there is to be allocated will be crucial. But no, I've seen some terrific examples of where there's no difference between a multi-academy trust and their approach, a single academy trust and a maintained school. It's just very inconsistent. And there's quite a bit of gaming of the system because there isn't enough buy-in to taking collegiate responsibility. And the leadership issue to work on jointly, but you can't just say it's a leadership issue for the council or for the academy trusts. It's got to be a different approach. I think we've got to reinvent the council's role in this, and the trusts have got to be willing to reinvent some of their approaches. But I think the discussions we've had, I'd be cautiously optimistic.
Thank you. Sean, do you want to come back on that at all?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Okay. Fizz, your hand's up next.
Thank you. Yes, I was just carrying on with that theme, the consistency and the inconsistency. I suppose I'm just wondering that I have a few friends that are school teachers, and they talk about this being a major issue, so they talk about it as a government issue rather than a local authority issue. So it would be interesting, I suppose. One, it's reassuring to hear your enthusiasm that this can be improved. But I can appreciate that some schools may be better than others, and that consistency across the whole of BCP is what I would be concerned about, and across the UK as well. And I'm just wondering whether there's one, I suppose we'll see over the next year or two, but also whether there was anything that we could write to the government about to make the job easier. I don't have the expertise to know what that would be, but I was just wondering if there was something.
What we found in the inquiry is that there, and I don't mean this as a cop-out, but there's a lot to be done locally, and that does involve discussion with government at some level, whether it's the Regional Schools Commissioner or with DFE. Of course, I'm a DFE advisor, but I do think that there is an opportunity for BCP, which is a highly academized system, to develop a strong partnership between the council, maintained schools and academy trusts. That isn't about blanket academization, that is about the best possible deal for local children. The government obviously controls funding. Everybody's got a view about whether it's enough or not. The general view is it's never enough, and how can it be? But I would say the agenda for the next year is local,
Mm.
to get our own house in order first.
I would support that position, Chair.
Right. Thank you very much. Fizz, do you want to come back on that at all?
Thank you.
Sandra, you've got your hand up next.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got just another quick question. High needs funding block, it was mentioned earlier. It's being scrutinised by the High Needs Block Recovery Board. Can I just ask where the findings are actually going to be reported? Okay.
I think Nicola's best placed.
Thank you, Chairman, with your permission.
Of course, Nicola.
Thank you. Sandra, this is the body that I was referring to earlier when responding to Councillor Bartlett. This is the one chaired by Graham Farrant and with the membership that I set out before. It's only met the once. My expectation is it will report through to Cabinet and Council in the usual way through the quarterly budget monitoring reports as appropriate.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? Okay, thank you, Sandra. Mark, you're next.
Yes, it was just about going back to exclusions and the inclusivity of certain academies. If we were providing a rating and that rating was reviewed by the Regional Schools Commissioner, and that would inform their decision whether to permit schools to recruit further and schools into their trust and inform whether they were suitable to become hosts to further schools.
Yes, well, I think one of the difficulties is we don't have a BCP-wide definition of inclusion. We don't have a common programme before an exclusion to try to prevent it. It's done in different ways by different trusts, and we don't really have the dialogue with the trusts who don't take a child to, I think, do that, to have a mature dialogue. And that's what I was talking about with gaming. There are children are often pushed around, and sometimes, of course, parental preference plays a part. But it's a bit like children in foster care. If you move them around, they don't benefit. And at some point, we have to say about all of these children that they stay where they are, and we do whatever's needed to. And it's at a much higher threshold that we say, well, that child needs to be in alternative provision or in special provision. But I think in relation to confronting academies, I don't think that will work. I think it's got to, the thought of a league table on inclusion, they'll run a mile. So I think we've got to do it through dialogue.
Yeah, my question to that is it worth looking at a BCP-wide definition of inclusion to publicise with schools?
I do think so, Chair. Yes, I do think there are some standards to keep to. They're not explicit at the moment. That does give a lot of wriggle room. I think there could well be a more formal pre-exclusion multi-agency conference to make sure that everybody has done as much as they can. There are some schools that do that, but it's not uniform. So yes, I do think across a complex area like BCP with trusts, the grammars, the college, private schools, and so on, some standards will help.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Mark, your hand is still up. Do you want to come back, or is that legacy hand?
I'll try and find a way of lowering it. Thank you.
Well, I'll lower it in my mind for the moment and see what you could. Lisa, you've got a.
Thank you. Yes, moving on to the summary of equality implications, which is number 15 on page 71. I'm just wondering, it states that more needs to be done to review the impact of services on vulnerable groups, and there are suggestions that are being made that are happening, but I'm wondering how confident you are that this will work.
Do you mean in terms of the measures, or do you mean the approach?
Yes, the suggestions that have been made, you know, how confident are you that they're going to work out, and that where it says most services making a difference to vulnerable individuals are multi-agency services. So a major part of the improvement journey in children's services is to build strong external partnerships, etc., etc. Are you sort of confident that this is going to work out? Thank you.
I think good and outstanding local authorities in any of their inspections will always go back to the strength of partnership working. And in the high risk cases, it's managing the risk together. And in low risk cases and prevention, so early help and prevention services, it's about getting in quick. So very confident is my position on that. And from an evidence base of, as I say, Ofsted visits and my own experience of what works.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Right. I've got a sort of slightly more specific question here, because it's something which has been coming through to children quite a lot. Is on page 75, improvements using Mosaic, because I know we had a lot of discussion a couple of years ago looking at the two types of computer recording system. So what I was just interested, because I believe that everybody uses Mosaic now. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And have we got the improvements that we hope for? And the teams that were using alternative software, have they become familiar now? And is it actually making their work easier?
So we still have the risk, because we still have Care Together or Care Direct and also Mosaic. So we have not eliminated the risk completely. We are, in terms of the Mosaic workflows and changes to enable safer practices, yes, there is a huge effort of changes that have happened to Mosaic. A small example, but very significant, is we now have a flag system when a young person is known to be at risk from child sexual exploitation. Now, that might sound like a really simple thing to do. In the good old days of paper, you probably would just get a red pen and tick. But it is, for a system, you have to change a load of things in the workflow to enable that to happen. So that's just a very small but significant example. So in terms of enabling practitioners to feel more confident in the information they're drawing down from Mosaic, yes. In terms of eliminating the risk between the two systems, it's reducing, but it hasn't gone. Does that answer your question, Chair?
Yes, I think it does. We're saying that we've come a long way, but there's still a bit of work to do, basically.
It's a big programme of work, and it will not be concluded until later next year. But we are trying to close down the opportunities. New cases are not being opened in anything other than Mosaic, but it's that legacy, historical, looking back on a child's file that invites colleagues to go into a different system, and that's what we're working to eliminate, not just close a gap, to eliminate.
Okay, now I understand a lot more now, because you said that the new system and the legacies of the old cases, so I get that a lot more now. Jane, you had your hand up.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, I'd like to ask a question about the part on one of the enclosures about the open inclusive culture, the Progress Forum. And it seems to me that with your issues with staffing, this is a really good idea to get staff engaged and get their views on things. Were you hoping that, I mean, obviously you were, I guess, that you get higher than 30% engagement on your consultation questionnaire, but we always want higher engagement than we get, don't we, on those? And I see that you're setting out a second questionnaire. What will you achieve with that one that you haven't achieved already with the first one, please?
I'll let Anthony come in, but I'll just answer the question, Councillor Kelly, about the persistence of sending them out. So we do want more than 30%, and one of the ways of securing that is by continuing to ask the service for their feedback. When you're dealing with changing customer practice and culture, you know, it takes a while for the service to, and this is one of Anthony's phrases, but I think it's become very familiar to me, to sort of suspend the disbelief that anything is going to change. So you keep going and going and going. So I suppose, if I'm really honest, there's a part of me that thinks staff might think, oh goodness me, I need to fill this in because they're going to keep sending it. And if that has an effect, and that's worthy too. But it's the richness of the information that comes back, good, bad or indifferent. So we will continue to go with it. And I'll hand over to Anthony about the overall progress forum and its link in with the wider temperature check for the workforce. Does that answer the first bit though, Councillor Kelly?
Yes, I think it does. Yes, I think so. And yes, okay, thank you.
Well, just to build on that, we're trying to measure improvement in morale, well-being and engagement, and to track it every month in a short 2 or 3 question survey, because staff disengagement, churn and low morale was a key feature a year or so ago, and the churn over the last year has still been far too much, far too little stability. And it's, if you imagine councillors changed every 4 weeks and you didn't know who was in charge and who was representing what, it would be chaos. So the department is the same. It needs stability. It needs to know who's running it. It needs to know what your place in it is, and that you are listened to. It's the same as children in their own cases or in schools. So we've got to make big progress. It's been a good start, but nowhere near enough. So we're tracking the experience of the people who use the service and the people who provide it to get to the point of, or the aim would have to be, what an outstanding organisation gets, which is generally around 80% satisfaction levels.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Jane?
Yes, I think it does. I can actually see, as long as you're doing really short, sharp questionnaires, that continuing with those is really, really a good idea. There's nothing worse than a sort of 20-question questionnaire.
No, two or three blunt questions.
Excellent. And also feeding back those after you've had the responses, so that people know that either they're listened to, or yes, we've read that and we understand, but we can't deliver that thing. You know, it's kind of feedback, so they know that.
One of the positives about the Progress Forum was that by the second month, 70 staff had offered to support the work and support improvement. And I think many of them will have been staff who perhaps 6 to 9 months before would have been firing from the sidelines. So I think there is a shift towards let's try and work together to get through this.
Okay, thank you for that. I must admit, to start with, I was feeling a little worried about questionnaires, but at the end of it, I quite like it now. So it's that's good. Any other questions on this topic? No, in that case, it just really, I need to do a bit of summing up. We had quite a discussion, actually. It's been quite varied, hasn't it? We started off looking at how to move on to good practice, and we decided it was just basically time that was needed. We've talked about less fragile workforce and workforce planning. We've spent a lot of time talking about inclusion within schools, looking at examples of good practice, inclusion. We talked about maybe a BCP-wide definition of inclusion. We talked a bit about high needs funding, which seems to come back to a lot of our discussions, high needs block funding. Working with external partnerships and external agencies. Previous discussion about Mosaic and the risks involved there. and progress forum and the questionnaire, which we finished off on. I don't think I missed anything else out particularly. Yes, and all we've got to do there is basically note our comments to hopefully help that they are helping us move forward. So it's item 11. The COVID impact to include update on pupil premium and child poverty. It's on page 91 of the papers. This report comes to us as several of us have been curious about how pupil premium money is spent within schools. And we have an interest about the checks and balances involved to ensure the money is spent appropriately. I believe Kelly Twitchen, head teacher of the virtual school and college, is going to present this report.
Good evening, Chair. Yes, I am.
Welcome, Kelly. It's a second time with us now, and you're welcome back.
Thank you. So you've all had a chance to read the report, but just to pick out a couple of points from it, you'll notice that there are different types of pupil premium, and the pupil premium that is awarded to those young people in care is often referred to as pupil premium plus, and that isn't given directly to schools. That comes through us as a virtual school and college. And there are a number of checks and measures around how that money is allocated to schools, one of them being the Pupil Education Plan meeting, the Personal Education Plan meeting, sorry, that happens every term. There are other types of pupil premium, and those monies are directly put into a school's budget, and the most common is around free school meals, and schools will often be looking to encourage parents to take up the offer of free school meals because it obviously adds, gives them the ability to claim for additional monies that will support the young people. It is completely up to the parent as to whether or not they wish to put in their claim for free school meals, and this can affect how much money a school then has in their budget. In regards to the changes around pupil allocation, if you look at point 8, there has been a recent change around when the government are looking at which census data they are using to calculate the monies, and you'll see there that there has been a potential loss to schools, not only across BCP but nationally, and there are schools that have been impacted more than others. I've already spoken about free school meals. In areas where schools have a high number of free school meal uptake, they will obviously have seen a bigger impact to those where there isn't such a high demand for them. The other point I wanted to just bring your attention to was the work that went on during COVID from schools, ensuring that our families and our children had food. There was an awful lot of work whereby actually some of our head teachers were out delivering food parcels as well, and there was a huge amount of work to make sure that our young people had food, the food that they needed. So that really does need to be recognised. You'll notice the HAF project as well has been mentioned in the report, which was really successful, and we will be looking to complete that again. We had a great take up and some really positive comments from families and young people about the provision that was offered, which was great. And it was great to see our young people doing something that really did develop some social skills and give them a bit something to look forward to after a very interesting year. And then finally, also to recognise the work that's gone on in the children's centres. They have been open throughout lockdown, and I know that there was a real interest in how children's centres were going to support, and particularly through COVID, and just to say really that they've carried on and supported, and where they haven't been able to see families face to face, they've had a really robust online offer. So really, they were the points I wished to highlight. And were there any questions?
Well, thank you very much for that. Now, I know I've got a couple of questions, but I'm going to go to Lisa Northover first, Councillor Northover, because I know this is one of the things that you particularly had an interest in the past, and I bet you may ask some of the things that are on my mind as well.
Oh, okay. I just wondered how, I know that families, I don't know who I'm supposed to be looking at. Is it my computer or over here? Okay. I'm not sure. I remember when my children went to school not that long ago, the way that the free school meals worked was that if you were working at all, you weren't entitled to them, even if you were on a very low income. And I imagine that a lot of families must go in and out of being able to have free school meals through perhaps a year or through the time they're at school. And I wondered how this affects the allocation to the school. And I also wondered, is there a knock-on? Do the actual children receive, for whom the school has got the money, the reason the school have got the money, do they actually end up directly benefiting all the time? So when you've got something like extra classes, how precisely would the school be targeting the actual children that were the reason for them getting that money?
That's a really good point. And schools, so the money isn't ring fenced. When you're talking about free school meals and the pupil premium that is allocated to that money isn't ring fenced to specific children as it is for those young people in care. So there lies a difference. However, there is an expectation for schools to publish on websites and make it very public what they use their pupil premium for. And Ofsted would also be looking to find out through inspections and conversations with head teachers what impacts that pupil premium is having. So whilst it isn't necessarily ring fenced to a specific young person, the expectation is that the money is used to benefit all those young people that are entitled to it. So this might include interventions for reading, for writing. This might be, schools may use pupil premium for forest schools. They may use it for a after school club, whereby young people who are entitled to free school meals are able to attend without having to pay. I think it is tricky to actually say specifically, does every single young person benefit 100%? But I think it would be fair to say that our head teachers are very aware of the needs of our young people, and they will do their very best to ensure that everybody that needs the support in whatever area that may be, whether that's social emotional, whether that's academic, that they will receive the support that they need. So I hope that answers that part of your question. In regards to the first part around, so once you are entitled to the pupil premium, that stays with you. So it doesn't chop and change. So schools don't have it 1 minute and then not the next, if that makes sense. There's probably a much better way to explain that than I've just done.
Thank you. Lisa, does that answer your question, or do you want to come back at all? If I may, I'll just pick up on that, because just to be clear in my mind, because as far as I can see, pupil premium money gets paid directly to the schools, and the only sort of checks and balances on it is via Ofsted, and Ofsted sort of look at strategies rather than individual pupils. So my question, and I think you've answered this question. So there are no checks to ensure that a pupil who's entitled to pupil premium money actually has the money spent on them. So if you've got a class of pupils with 2 or 3 people who are pupil premium money, that money could be spent on improving the whole class. The strategy means that everybody improves their education, and yet everybody improves rather than just the pupil premium person. And the second part of it is, do schools therefore have any strategy in place to be more dynamic with the money? I'm thinking if a pupil premium, a pupil who received pupil premium money suddenly is in the need for something, like the laptops went for COVID, but I am thinking more about post-COVID. If a need suddenly arises, it could be something simple like, going on a DOV, doing bronze DOV would be very good for them. There needs to be money made available for that. Is there any way of ensuring that schools can provide that?
Schools will have various ways to look at spending. So if there is a vulnerable young person that a school decides would benefit from doing something, as you say, like D&B, and there was some money that was needed, this is down to the individual head teachers on how they spend that money. But if schools feel that is something that's going to support that young person's education, that's going to ensure that they're able to learn, then they will use the money. The money is there for their discretion, so it's there. They can use that if that's how they feel it would be best spent, and that they would have the best impact and the best outcome from it.
Yeah, so thank you for that. So basically something we sort of have to trust the head teachers.
We do.
It is the answer. That's right. Thank you. Fizz, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, just looking at changes in pupil premium allocation, paragraph 8 on page 92. I thought we had quite bad inequality in the UK compared with other places in Europe, and that children were particularly, obviously children that are entitled to free school meals are going to be particularly vulnerable. And so I'm just concerned that this decision is making that worse by the government, and what your professional opinion is on that, and whether that's something that we should write to the government about, because it seems, just looking at it, it seems a little bit, well, it seems to be taking the most vulnerable children and not supporting them in the way that we should.
Can I answer that, Chair? Because I think that there's a number. I think this might be worthy of a separate conversation. Very happy to do that with Kelly. But actually, there are a number of other funding streams that the schools have access to. So before I rush to a judgment on the overall impact, and I agree, when you read it, it looks really stark, doesn't it? In terms of, what's this going to do for disadvantaged families and children's, but we need to see it in the context of the other grants that have been made available. So I think if my colleague Kelly is happy to, and you're happy to, Felicity, let's meet offline and we can provide you with the information of the other grants that are available, because it isn't as straightforward as one grant stopping or being reduced and another coming into fruition. So I think it's worthy of getting into the detail.
Yeah, and just to add to that, the point I made earlier, different schools will be impacted differently. So we need to look at where that who and where that impact is. For some schools, this won't be, they won't feel the impact of this. But yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. We can talk about that offline.
Are you okay with that answer, Fizz?
Well, I suppose just in terms of this being published, then whether it's worth putting something in there, like to stop it being quite so sort of stark. To explain, but it doesn't matter. I think it needs to be stark.
I think it needs to be stark. I think it draws the eye in the right line. What I'm wishing to furnish committee with is the detail that sits behind that, so an informed decision can be made about the impact for children, which is the point that you were helpfully raising. So but I think it needs to stay as it is, quite frankly.
Okay.
But I'd like to actually just, because I've got a question very similar, but not quite the same. So it's about, because Sandra, you're next, but I'm just going to butt in first, I'm afraid, because what I was wanted to know is this now a one-off changing, which is now means that we'll feel this effect this once, but then in future years the effect won't happen, because I know schools are very good, have been historically very good at actually teasing out the pupil premium free school meals, because they, a school, more children they can get free school meals for, the more funding they get, and also the exam algorithms are more in their favour for their pass rate at GCSE. So I know schools work on the number of free school meals between September and Christmas to get the numbers right. Will this change affect this year only, and therefore in future years things will be done differently, or is it now every year it's going to be a shortfall? But I feel the answer is going to be the same answer that you gave Fizz, that it's more complicated than this, and we need to talk about it in detail. But I'm putting words into your mouth now.
No, but you're reflecting my thinking, Chair. We do need to get into the detail to be able to have an informed position on that for you to be able to scrutinise.
So I think what I'm saying is, therefore, I'd like to be part of the same conversation when we have it.
So is that an invite for yourself, Chair, as well as Felicity?
Yeah, please, yes.
Okay, fine.
Sandra.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on what Kelly had been saying and you had been saying about pupil premium, and that's wearing my trustee hat as well. I've noticed, obviously, that COVID's had a huge impact on families and their needs, and these needs are now often very different from pre-COVID days, and I'm aware from experience that schools know this, and they're looking at the best way to meet these differing needs, and they're changing or aligning any of the services or the bits and pieces that they provide in order to accommodate the youngsters. And they're also, I can speak as a trustee, that they are working with voluntary agencies in their area to actually, work together to meet any different needs that are arising. And it's work in progress, but I suspect it's happening absolutely everywhere. The schools are changing to adapt developing needs. Okay.
So thank you for that. There wasn't really a question for anybody there, was there? It was just some information, and thank you very much for that. Lisa, Councillor Lisa Northover.
Thank you. I just had a question about, I saw that the ASDA vouchers that we used through an app to be able to give the college and I think other children as well bits of money over the Christmas and Easter, and I just wondered how successful that was and whether or not you were able to monitor whether or not they all actually did cash the voucher in, and so whether or not that was successful, whether or not it worked, that method.
To be perfectly honest, I don't have the answer to that, and I would have to find out. I don't know if we can say whether or not they were all used. I would have to speak with a colleague of mine, but I don't know, but I can find out is the answer to that question. I don't know if it's possible. It may well be, but it would certainly be it would be really interesting, actually, as you say, to find out if the vouchers actually were used.
The voucher scheme was an overwhelming success, that I can confirm. The question about the drawdown of them, forgive me, I think I'm hearing you correctly. That will be a complicated thing to do, but it doesn't mean to say that we can't try. But there will be all kinds of challenges with that, not least data protection. But let's go away and have a go. But the voucher scheme was actually overwhelmingly, and Councillor Green will probably recognise this, what parents wanted. They didn't want food parcels, they wanted vouchers.
Yeah. So summarise it. Yeah, I think we're saying a really interesting question, but maybe impossible to answer. So, do you want to come back on that at all?
No, we take the challenge in the spirit that it's been given. I'm just trying to manage expectations that it isn't completely in our gift, but it doesn't stop us from trying.
Well, so thank you very much for that. Are there any other questions or points on this? I'm not seeing any further hands. No, in that case, it's just a quick summary. So we talked quite a bit about the use of pupil premium money in schools and how it's used and if they are and what checks and balances they are on it. We also talked quite a bit about the changes in pupil premium allocation and sort of the difference from January to October, and we're going to get some more information on that later. And then we had a brief discussion about the vouchers and set a difficult task to do to find out every voucher if it was cashed. Agenda item 12, which is on page 95 of the pack, the Send Improvement Journey. So this item's here because the committee members have requested that we keep I've put a watching brief, but that sounds a little bit formal actually on the Send Improvement Journey. We as a committee have been successful in getting a member of the committee appointed to the Send Improvement Board. So we have to thank Sandra for going on to that. I believe Terry Reynolds is going to present this report. And when we come to questions, I'm actually going to go to Sandra first, but rather than to questions, because she may well have some extra bits to feed in on our behalf. So, Terry.
Thank you, Chair. BCP is not alone in facing a whole number of challenges in providing good services for children and young people with special educational needs and/or disabilities. And there's a considerable overlap between the challenges that BCP faces and other authorities. That is often wrapped up in problems to do with the high needs block. The amount of money dedicated to providing for special needs through the government formula, because there isn't a local authority in England of the 151 that doesn't have overspends now on their high needs block. So that seems to suggest that either in every authority, people running the high needs block are incompetent and unable to manage it, or actually there may be something systemically wrong with the process. So everybody is facing that difficulty, and of course that does focus the mind. However, this isn't a matter simply of a budget. It's also about the provision that is good for children and young people, and how the authority manages to provide that in line with the legislation. And sometimes the necessary emphasis we have on managing the high needs block can give the impression to parents and carers, for example, and indeed to schools and others, that all we're ever concerned about is saving money and not actually about making the best provision possible. And the challenge for us is to make the best provision possible and keep within the budget, and those are the difficulties. Now, you've seen the report and you've got the slide pack to give you the present situation, but a key part of this is the level of demand for education, health and care plans and the resource that demands. So, as I've said in the report, there was a 35% increase nationally in children with EHCPs between 2014 and 2018. Within BCP, there's just under 3,000 children and young people with EHCPs. And in the last 2 complete months of April and May, there have been a further 100 requests for assessment for EHCPs. And as you can see from that level of demand, the pressure is unrelenting, and it is closely related, in my view, to the points that Anthony and Elaine were making earlier about inclusive practices in schools. The challenge for us is for all mainstream schools to be able to provide as inclusively as much as possible a good education for all pupils before we need to move to any form of special provision. And improving what's on offer in the mainstream is a key part of making sure that the needs of children and young people are met. And that indeed is what we get fed back to us from children and young people in consultation about what they want from their schools. And you can see that in the slides as well. So I'll just leave that as the introduction, and I'm happy after the member of the committee has spoken to take any other questions.
Thank you very much. Sandra, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that? Please add then.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, I thought I'd give you a bit of background about the work of the SEND Improvement Board. I think that many councillors were aware that SEND services needed to improve, and I certainly heard as much from parents and in conversation with other councillors. And I very much welcome the setting up of the SEND Improvement Board, and I'm delighted to be a member of this board. The board's got a wide membership, and it includes reps from Children's Services, Adult Social Care, Dorset CCG, school heads from each of the primary, secondary and special school sectors, Bournemouth and Poole College, Dorset Healthcare Trust, Community Action Network, Parent Carers Together, plus our own portfolio holders for Adult Social Care and Council Little Green for Children's. So the board has an independent chair, Claire Burgess, who is an LGA advisor for improvement of children's services. And it's been meeting for around 12 months now, and a wide membership ensures that there's actually plenty of challenge, which is clearly needed and very important. And progress is being made, and the progress is evidence-based, as you can see from your papers, but there is still a long way to go. Having said that, I do want to acknowledge that a huge amount of work has gone into improving this service, and this journey has not been easy. But I must also emphasise there is still much work needed before we achieve the service we want and our young people need. And if I can use a medical analogy, I would say the patient has survived major surgery and has now been moved into the recovery ward. I understand Ofsted will be inspecting the service shortly, and I hope they will acknowledge the work that has taken place, the progress that we've made, and that we are very much aware that more work is needed. For me and most members, I know that hearing the voice of the young people and their parents and carers is very, very important. And I'm really pleased that this is being well facilitated. And members of the board are recently invited to an event with children and young people with special needs. And they were helped by participation workers. They were asked what they thought could be improved in BCP for children and young people with special needs. And of course, they told us, and no uncertain terms. And the results will be the subject of a spotlight session at the next board meeting. And I understand work is also taking place within the council to progress some of the suggestions from the young people in the meantime. But spotlight sessions on various topics relating to the SEND services are held at every board meeting, and members of the board are giving an in-depth view of the topic chosen. And I think, Chairman, in conclusion, I think it might be a good idea to have SEND updates at these children's ONS meetings, so members of the committee can familiarise themselves with the current and ongoing work of this SEND Improvement Board. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Sandra. Your final point actually comes into the final point I've got on what my summary. We should be add this to the forward plan. So that's what I'll be interested to know people's feelings on that. If I kick off with a question, looking at the paper, I think it's about on page 104, embedding the new SEND quality assurance framework is one issue that is mentioned. Could you describe to me just briefly what the SEND quality assurance framework is and what's the limiting factor here that's stopping it from being embedded?
Terry, would you like me to answer that one, or are you happy to?
You can start, and I'll add anything else on the end if you wish. Yeah. I
was just going to say, because we've had a recent board, as Sandra has referenced, Chair. So the block was that we didn't have a set of practice standards, Chair and colleagues, that we were then going to quality assure the service against. There has been part of the toolbox work that Anthony's been undertaking across the service has engaged our SEND colleagues and children with disabilities, and they have come up with their practice standards and the way in which we do business and we measure ourselves against it. That is now in place, and more significantly is the resource to undertake quality assurance activity. So it wasn't a case of not having a desire to get on with it. It was making sure that we were measuring ourselves against the right thing. So I'll stop at that point, because literally that came up, and obviously Nicola's on in the meeting as well at the last board meeting. So Terry, you weren't there for that, so that was just my update.
It's crucial that there are those performance standards that underpin the quality assurance framework, and that all staff understand them. Then there's a number of other aspects. Critically is the role of team managers and assistant team managers in quality assuring the work of members of the team, and in timeliness and quality. But we've also recently employed an external auditor with a lot of experience as a lead officer for SEND and other authorities to actually audit EHCPs on a sample basis and give feedback on strengths, weaknesses of individual ones to team members, but then also to pick out any systemic issues for us. So we are using an external person to quality check management processes.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Does anybody else have any questions at the moment? Councillor Lisa Lewis, yes.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just wondered, because noticing that there's such a massive deficit in the high needs block, how are you coping with such a sort of shortfall in the required funding? And you know, as Fizz was saying for previous question, should we all be lobbying the government for more funding for the higher needs block?
I think the issue of the overspends in the high needs block, as I said, it's in all 151 local authorities. The government and the DfE in particular are very, very well aware of the issues around the high needs block. There have been a number of pilot meetings between the Department for Education and the largest overspending authorities to look at what can be done around trying to resolve some of their issues. And in fact, the learning that's come out of that has been nothing new in what authorities are trying to do to manage the budget. There have been some, I don't know how to put this, some accountancy manoeuvres to lodge high needs deficits sort of in plain sight, but so that they're not a drag on general council budgets and on schools budgets at the moment. But I mean, the system obviously needs a resolution. At the moment, we're all trying to cope with this. The overspend as it is will just compound because the level of demand is there that keeps growing it until a sort of national resolution is found. But I mean, people within the system are on a continuum of they can't sleep at night because they think the whole thing's going to collapse, to the other end that says no government could possibly allow this whole system to collapse, so a solution will be found. We just have to try and manage it as efficiently as possible, but it is a cash limited budget for a demand led service, and it's impossible to reconcile it completely.
Thank you. Very, very concerning.
Thank you very much for that answer. Councillor Beverly Dunlop, I see you've got your hand raised. Beverly, thank you very much for joining us, by the way, when you're not feeling well. And I hope you are feeling better soon. And thank you for asking a question. So over to you, Beverly.
Thank you for letting me join by Teams. I'm certainly feeling less than 100%. Chairman, I'm very pleased to see this on the agenda. And I'm even more pleased to note in the accompanying documentation that scrutiny is considered part of governance. We should have a clear line of sight, because that hasn't been the case up to now. Over several months, I've asked a number of questions and raised several concerns about the SEND service, which are still unanswered. So I would like some assurances, first of all, from Councillor Moore, that those questions will come through and be answered and forthcoming. But on this particular update journey here, a journey needs to have a starting point and have a destination, and in order for us to have that oversight and track improvements, I think what scrutiny needs to know is the baseline, what our targets are, and some KPIs. I think we need to have a way, we must need a way of managing where those improvements are, and we don't know what that baseline was. So I guess what I'm really asking is, when do we actually get a plan by which we can hold you to account? That would be my first question. And then if I could just pick up on a couple of things, if I may. When we were talking about quality assurance framework, performance standards, again, I have no sight of what that framework is, what those standards are, what we're performing to, who set them, are they good enough, are they what we would expect? And I raise that because I have in the past asked questions about the quality of some of the education health care plans, and it was Terry discussed it earlier about how those are being monitored, and I guess that I'd like some assurance of that. And I've just got one other tiny point, if I may, which could probably apply to a number of things coming forward tonight. How is this improvement journey, indeed some of the other things I've seen, how is it reflected in our children and young people's plan? Because that to me is quite a big overarching plan, which has 4 main aspirations around fulfilled, happy, included and resilient. And I think we need to start thinking about how that is reflected in other services. Thank you, Chairman.
So just correct me, that I believe there's 3 questions there, basically.
Yeah, did you get them? Do you want me to repeat them?
If I ask the officers if they're quite happy, they've got the 3 points.
I'm not sure I have. I've got the one about the sort of metrics, and the second one on what's the baseline. What was the third one?
Well, that's one real point. In order for scrutiny to have oversight and be part of the governance, there has to be metrics, and I don't know what the baseline was for this. I don't know what are we aiming at, what's our targets, and what are the key performance indicators by which we can measure you. In fairness, it's a point I raise a lot at scrutiny. Where is the evidence that a service is actually improving in terms of numbers and achievements? That was the one point. The second point was around the quality assurance framework. How do we see that improvement at scrutiny? How are we assured that things are improving? How do we know what those standards were, how they were set and determined? And then the third point was really, as I say, could apply generally. How do we reflect the children and young people's plan in our SEND service? Because they are 4 key aspirations that we've approved about young people.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much for that. Shall
I try to go through those? So the question about the metrics, the baseline, the targets, the KPIs, there are a number of measures that are national measures, which inspectors will look at, and our comparators, and we have in the service a SEND dashboard for keeping a handle on that. Those are such things as the timeliness of completion of EHCPs. They're all meant to be completed within 20 weeks, and no authority completes 100% within 20 weeks, but you know, that nationally it ranges from authorities that are completing 5% within the timescale to completing 85%. So there's that is one of the key performance indicators for us. The second is the backlog of requests for assessments for EHCPs, the number of those and how those are progressing. That's another one. A third one is on annual reviews, because every EHCP is meant to have an annual review, which can lead to amendment, may lead to discontinuation, or may lead to it being sustained, but there's a process to go through. So those just under 3,000 that I mentioned should be reviewed every year. How many, what's the backlog there? So those are figures we're looking at, because BCP has not performed well on those, and we're looking at that to see what the improvement is, and we're looking at that month on month. So if you would like to see the dashboard that we have as part of keeping an eye on this, I'm happy for us in future to bring you the dashboard to have a look at what those measures are. As I say, we're looking at them monthly. You're not going to see them that often, but we could do a summary of the most recent ones. The baselines on those are, well, there's two. There's the comparators with national averages, which are important, but in the sense of what the journey is, how far the improvement has been. So, for example, the report that you had on page 104 talks about there were 1,112 annual reviews in progress and not completed. As of today, there are 1,094 that are in progress and not completed. Now that's not the same number, because of course every week new ones reach their year's timescale, but it's about seeing those numbers go down. So things like that we can look at and that we keep an eye on. And our key performance indicators are about EHCP timeliness and also about annual reviews, but they are also about tribunals, the numbers of parents that take us to tribunals, because a small number of tribunals suggests that where there are differences between parents and carers and the local authority, you are able to resolve those without going to tribunal rather than being in a legal process. So that's another one. Although, so those are but we can give you the full dashboard. The other ones are around, you spoke about the quality assurance framework, and how will we see the improvement? I think, again, that dashboard is a way of tracking the improvement, because if we're not improving on the timeliness, if we're not improving on the assessments, if we're not reducing the number of complaints, then we're not improving the service. I missed out the absolutely key other indicator, which is the allocation of places to pupils, making sure that children and young people with EHCPs have a school place. And, you know, there is a process to go through of finding the school that will meet the needs and that the parents and school are both happy with. But there should not be a large number of those, and those that are waiting for a place, and those are another one of concern. So those will be in the quality assurance framework. The third one, I'm conscious I'm going on, about reflecting the children and young people's plan within SEND. I think those aspirations for children and young people are exactly those that you should have for children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities. They shouldn't have a separate set of aspirations. They should be the same set of aspirations. And in a sense, it's how does our improvement plan encode those aspirations for SEND young people, rather than how do you improve SEND young people within that children and young people's plan. That's a plan for everybody.
Thank you for that very long answer. Beverly, does that answer your point?
Yeah, I have to say, first of all, on the children and young people's plan, that's absolutely exactly what I was looking to hear. They should be the things that we live and breathe by. With this dashboard, if it's okay with you, Chairman, I think it is something that we absolutely have to see, because otherwise we don't have any oversight or way of governance. So if that's all right with you, I would like to see it. And you mentioned the complaints. Does that include numbers of complaints in there, or is that just something else? And then on the tribunals as well, I think I remember asking a whole set of questions about those as well. So maybe what I'm looking for, I can get through from that dashboard. And then obviously complaints is unfortunately feedback from parents, but that would be good if that's okay with you, Chairman.
Yeah.
My feeling is, coming back to what we talked about slightly earlier, and Fizz, I'll come to you in a moment. I missed you. I'll just try to get this finished. My feeling is, when we talked about maybe adding this to the forward plan to revisit, there was, people couldn't see it online, but there was nodding in the room. So I'm getting the feeling that we would all like to see it coming back. And my suggestion is that at that point we do a little bit of work on the dashboard. So it can be shown to us and explained. Now the timescale for that, I'm looking for advice on the timescale from maybe Elaine or somebody else.
The dashboard is currently, the key performance indicators for the SEND Improvement Board are already in place. So there is no reason why we can't provide those for the next meeting, the next committee meeting. I am making a plea for no additional work. We are expecting a SEND inspection, and we're still responding to the challenges of COVID. So I'm not looking to take on any additional work at this moment in time. But to be perfectly frank, what we've got, if it's serving the improvement board, then I know it's of good enough quality for you to be able to use in scrutiny.
So are we saying that we can bring this item on the forward plan to the next meeting?
Well, is that in July? Because we will be just coming out. Sorry,
that is in July, 27th of July.
Then I'm advocating no, the one after, because we're going to have a SEND inspection this month. Okay. And we will be completely consumed for a month with that, which means we'll be into July. So it would be really helpful not to have additional asks while we're responding to that. Of course, if we, we can bring a verbal update on the SEND inspection to committee, but my ask is that we don't distract officers from that. It's a very it's a labour intensive process when you're preparing for an inspection, which is what the service are doing.
Well, I'm personally quite happy with that. So we're saying that not the next meeting, but the meeting after. I'm looking for anybody dissenting on that at all. No,
Chairman,
yes.
sorry, I just come back. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. But what I think perhaps we should see this, have some regular intervals of this on our forward plan. I think that's the thing, isn't it, to regularly look at the dashboard.
Yeah,
but yeah, I completely understand why you wouldn't want to do it in July.
And we're saying that we can have a bit of a verbal feedback at July of how that went, but not a report.
Yeah, no, we're very happy to do that. We are expecting, as I say, the SEND inspection this month, so we can furnish committee with a verbal update on that.
And our part of the deal is we ask no more tonight. That's the.
It's greatly appreciated, the understanding. Thank you.
Okay, so Fizz, over to you, but please don't ask for anything.
Oh, okay. I just had a question on page 106. No, 107, and it says in areas of need of improvement, suitable independent housing options. I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that. It seems like sort of that, like housing for all children and consistency of housing and it not causing huge financial stress to a family is important to everyone. And like house prices went up 10% last year in this area. And so it just seems like I'm really pleased to see it on there. But I also then noticed in your partnerships, there's no sort of house building partnership on there. It's all children's related. So I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that one, or sort of solving the suitable independent housing option.
The SEND strategy addresses some of that in a bit more detail, but it's a whole range of options, Felicity, that we're wanting for our young people, particularly bound in with the transition to adulthood. So I know Sarah's going to be talking about the sufficiency strategy, which obviously has an interface, but we have got a SEND strategy in addition to. So it's all housing options, not just the opportunity to purchase, and it's through the transitions with adults as well. And I think it's fair to say, and Nicola and Sandra were on the last improvement board. We were talking about the work that's been going on particularly led by adults in transitions, which actually is more advanced than some of the work that we've been able to progress within children's, Felicity. So I'm not wishing to suggest to you another conversation, as people are going to get very suspicious of all these individual conversations, but I'm sure that Sarah will walk you through the SEND strategy if that's helpful, because it is a very technical paper, but it's an invitation for you to take as you wish.
Yeah, I suppose my question was more around the housing crisis in general, and like if you're going to sort it out for SEND, then you would probably manage to sort it out for everybody.
I suppose I'm not. I can see that Nicola's got her hand up. I'm not suggesting I'm going to sort it out for SEND. What I'm saying is that there needs to be a range of options for those young people. But I'll hand over to Nicola to pick up the wider point that I think, Felicity, you're making.
Right, thank you. I've just noticed we said ask for nothing more, and we just asked you to sort out the whole housing crisis. But Nicola, if you can sort that out, over to you.
I'll take that away, Chairman. I was perhaps just going to draw the panel back to the piece of work in front of you, which is the SEND strategy, and you know, a wider discussion about housing options is very welcome, but that very firmly sits within the remit of another panel. This makes specific reference, actually what sits behind the indicator there is the needs of a particular group of young people, and I think we can give your panel some assurance that work is going on around those individuals, and that's really what that's referring to. It's being taken forward by Lorraine Mealings. Not to say that I can give you assurance that everything will be fixed and resolved to everyone's satisfaction, but that's what that indicator is referring to.
Thank you for that input, Nicola. Fizz, you're happy now?
Well,
as happy as you're going to be.
Yeah, there's not going to be an answer this evening.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any more hands, so I'll just sum up what we've been talking about, because it's been quite a varied discussion yet again. We've been talking about the high needs block overspend and the shortfall, and how that's a national issue and specifically to us as well. We've been talking about embedding new SEND quality assurance framework and performance standards, and whether we can have some sight of them. We had a discussion about looking at the metrics and baselines of target KPIs, quality performance framework, and reflection in children's plans. And we decided that we would like to see this item coming back again in not the next committee, but the committee afterwards, and that we could have a discussion about the dashboard at that point, and a brief discussion about suitable housing options. I think I've covered everything that we talked about there. Now we've been going now for 2 hours 13 minutes. We've got a couple of items left. I'll suggest we just take a 5-10 minute break now, to just give us a chance to stand up, stretch our legs, and powder our noses if we feel our noses need powdering, and come back in, shall we say, 10 minutes. Thank you very much, and welcome back to welcome back to the second part of the children's. No, I didn't have this problem in the classroom either. Some people would be in detention right now, I would say. Yeah. So welcome back to the second part of children's ONS. We've got a couple of items left on the agenda. So we're on item 13 now, which is on page 117 of the pack. The Sufficiency Strategy for Children in Care, CIC as it's called here, and the Care Experienced Young People, CEYP. For 2021-2024. So this report, if I'm correct, is on its journey to Cabinet and then full council. I am willing to be corrected on this if I'm wrong. I see, Mike, you've got your hand up, so I'll come to you first. We are looking for the committee to recommend a report or otherwise. And I believe Sarah Langdale is going to be presenting it. I saw, Mike, you put your hand up, so I'm just going to come to you first, if that's...
Yeah, I appreciate that, Richard. It was your comment at the beginning. I do understand from the monitoring officer that rather than this report going to council, the recommendation should be changed so that it goes that Cabinet approve this strategy. And the reason I understand is that apparently many BCP members, not surprisingly, have raised the issue of an awful lot of reports going to council. And I understand, therefore, the monitoring office has recommended that only those reports where there is a clear statutory requirement that it go to council, go to council. And this report doesn't fall into that category. So as I understand it, the recommendation changes to Cabinet are asked to approve. Interestingly, the fostering report, which we looked, not the fostering report, the youth justice report that we looked at earlier, apparently there is a statutory requirement that goes to council. So that's what will be happening with that one. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for that clarity, Mike. That's exactly what I was looking for. So Sarah, I believe you're going to present the report.
I am. Good evening, Chair and colleagues, councillors. If I can just start by introducing myself. My name's Sarah Langdale. I'm the Strategic Commissioner for Children's within BCP, sitting in Children's Services. We do have a statutory duty to provide a sufficiency strategy for children in care and care experienced young people. The apologies, sorry, I've lost my train of thought already, and that's really bad. I'll start again. So the statutory document seeks to improve the outcomes for looked after children and young people by providing guidance on the implementation of Section 22G of the Children Act 1989. We have a statutory duty to produce a document, and this document sets out 7 key priorities for us as a local authority to support these 2 specific cohorts. I'm assuming that everybody has had sight of the document. It's quite a lengthy document. Within the document, the 7 key priorities are listed. And on the back of this document, there will and has been produced an action plan to support those key priority areas. Senior officers have been identified that will lead these priority areas, and we're looking and have secured multi-agency input into these priority areas. Once the sufficiency strategy has been approved, going through the formal process, we'll then look to do a review in December. Every 12 months, we'll review the priorities and our progress on those priorities, and then produce a new action plan and potentially new priorities as we develop as a service. Is there any specific questions at all around the sufficiency strategy and the contents of the document?
Well, if I just come to just start the ball rolling with something that you said, because I have a question here which you've partly covered already, because you talked about 7 priorities, and it's in the paper it says includes the priorities include 7 priorities. So I'm just, is 7 an absolute number, or are the other priorities which are not included but are also priorities?
No, there are 7 key priority areas. Each priority area is obviously underpinned by other significant actions that need or priorities that underpin those key priorities. I'm really sorry, I'm not making sense, am I? But we've got an action plan, each key priority, and then there'll be priorities under that that lead officers will address, and we'll map our progress through an action plan.
So there's 7 key priorities, and those key priorities are subdivided into other priorities that feed into the key priorities.
Yes, apologies if that wasn't clear.
That's okay. I've got that now. I'm looking at it anyway. Lisa, your hand is up. Do you want to?
Thank you. I just wondered how what the government has said recently about the use of unregulated and unregistered provision for children in care. How I couldn't see a reference to that, but I might have missed it. I wondered how that has affected the provision for our children, and whether or not you're needing to make changes or anything like that at the moment.
Absolutely, we're fully cited on that, and actually that legislation is embedded within the majority of the priorities. If we look at, for example, priority 5, to increase the number of providers and improve the quality of residential provision within BCP, the specific legislation that you refer to is for young people, children in care under the age of 16, and the use of unregulated provision for that cohort. We've been very successful in BCP with minimising our use of that type of provision. So we're not anticipating a huge impact to us, but what we are doing is working with our current residential providers locally and our semi-independent providers to ensure that they regulate their provision in preparation for September. So we're really key on working in partnership with the providers that we've currently got locally to ensure that we meet that legislation standard.
Would it be fair to add to that, Sarah, that there will be budget pressures as a result of, because I think one of the things that you might be maybe thinking, Lisa, is about how we're managing the market, and Sarah is absolutely correct in the BCP has been successful in getting some of those conversions, but it would be remiss of us not to highlight here that there are some providers that are taking the opportunity to absolutely exploit the position in the market, given that from September that legislation comes into effect.
Thank you for that answer. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So Sandra, you are next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, priority 6 immediately caught my eye. Provide suitable local provision for complex teenagers, both on the edge of care and in care, who are at risk of child exploitation. Can I have some more information on that, please? Is this going to be an actual, like a hub, and build on the work of the team around the school and the complex safeguarding team? Thank you.
Sarah, do you want me to answer it, or do you want to?
I was going to hand over to you, Elaine, just for that wider strategic context around that one.
Okay, so the short answer is, Sandra, we've got no plans to open a hub. It is about making sure that the Edge of Care offer supports families so that they can stay together where it's safe to do so. And when we do have to use a residential or a specialist foster provision, that we have time to plan for that. So no intention at this, certainly in the next 3 years in the strategy, for us to build our own provision. Most of the requirement for young people that are at risk of exploitation means that they can't stay necessarily within the area. So I hope that answers your question, Sandra. And Sarah, does that do justice to what you were going to say?
Yes, absolutely. I also think it's key to mention that we are working with our local providers to enhance the provision that they offer in terms of child exploitation.
Thank you. That answers your question. Nathan Collins, you are next.
Just wanted to comment on part of the plan. I think it's point 9 in capturing the voice of children and young people. It says here that during your 2021 engagement, you're citing the Youth Parliament debate on homelessness. We really welcome your using our voices, but we would really like to know what you gained from that and how you're going to implement that in the future. And we also just wanted to say that we'd be more than happy to continue to work with this process, the Youth Parliament and the Youth Council as well.
Thank you very much. I've been to a number of your debates and found them really very interesting, actually. And excuse me, I've recently engaged with Rebecca and attended the homelessness one, but also the one on CAMS and etc. etc. So thank you for inviting me to those and letting me come along. It's really key for us as an organisation to capture your voice and also to listen to your views on homelessness. So I've attended a couple of the Youth Parliament, and I hope to continue to do that. And for those, for your views to be fed into this document and published alongside our action plan.
Thank you. Does that answer your point, Nathan?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and any updates on how that's being used, that'd be really great.
What I will do, Nathan, is as I attend the regular Youth Parliament events, I'll ask Rebecca to do a special session so that I can feed back to you on the progress that we're making on this document.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for offering that. Beverly, you are next.
Sorry, Chairman, just trying to unmute and move to a document as well. On the covering paper, on the actual the document, that's a cabinet document, I just wondered if on paragraph 2, when we refer to the national local drivers underpinning this strategy, whether the second item, rather than the council's corporate strategy, which is sort of now outdated and from the previous administration, but whether that should actually be the children and young people's plan that should be, or it should in any way be one of the documents informing this strategy. There was that point. And then I just had a question. I've got a couple of questions on the page. Let me get down to on page 5, when it talks about the children in care, there's the boxes, it says that 24% are BME, which seems, let's have a look, 24% from, BAME is the word you've used here, from a BAME background, which seems extraordinarily large, particularly when on page 18, when it refers to the ethnicity of children in care, it says white 91%. So that's probably my second point. Another question I have is certainly around the priorities that will be underpinned by an action plan. So can I ask my favourite question, please? Are we going to see some kind of dashboard around how we can monitor the progress in terms of performance indicators on that? I think that's it. Thank you, Chairman.
Sarah, which order would you like to answer those, and then I can assist as you indicate.
I was going to answer them in order, starting with the Children and Young People Plan and how that's embedded throughout the document and how that forms part of the action plan. You may be more versed, Elaine, than I in answering that question specifically, but I can state that it is referenced within the action plan, and we have got a priority. We have got a priority underpinning these to link to the Children and Young People Plan and make sure that there really is that dynamic engagement between both of the plans.
Yep.
In terms of the data that you mentioned, Councillor Dunlop, I'm quite happy to go back to my management information team, and actually thank you for picking that up. As you can imagine, a document quite as large as this, more eyes are better, but I'll go back. I was provided that information from our management information team, and I'll reference that back to them if that's okay, and come back to you with confirmation of the numbers. And then in terms of the action plan, I'm very keen to ensure that we do have, as does our colleagues, have clear sight of the progress that we're making in terms of the sufficiency strategy and the priorities that we've identified. It's really key for us to be able to evidence the excellent work that's going on within the commissioning team and how we're engaging with our wider partners to develop the services that we want for our children in care and care experienced young people, and that they are achieving the outcomes that we would like them to achieve. And I feel very passionately, as my colleagues, my internal colleagues will know, about getting this document signed off, but also to progress the work that underpins the outcomes for our children in care and care experienced young people, and ensuring that their lives are made better by this strategy.
And actually, Councillor Dunlop, I would suggest that this isn't one for KPIs. This is a qualitative response that Scrutiny needs. You know, it's the so what. Are these placements making a difference for these children and young people? That's not a piece of data. That is a qualitative. So I think the action plan, which is about qualitative, can be provided to Scrutiny with an update position as required. But I think it's not data, it is quality.
Yeah, can I come back, Chairman? Please?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, Beverly, if you want to come back on that.
Do you mind?
No, I think I just asked you to.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No. I agree with Elaine. I will perhaps use KPIs as a way of how I measuring what's going on, how we can see the achievement, how I've got that oversight, and how I can say we're doing this. So that's fine. So forgive my use of that. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the children's and young people's plan, it is certainly referenced in there, and I think that, as you said, there is a difference between referencing and embedding it, and I think that is such. I love the aspirations in that plan, and I think it really is something we have to live and breathe. Fine. The data's absolutely fine. It was just quite an alarming figure. There was just one other thing actually they almost forgot. Do you have an equality impact analysis behind this strategy as yet for one? And might I see it outside of the meeting? That would be great. Thank you very much.
Of course, that's just in development now, and as we move through the formal process of sign off, that will come in the formative weeks. So yes, and I'm more than happy to send you a copy of that. That's no problem at all.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Jane, it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think my question might well overlap with Councillor Dunlop slightly, but I'm looking at page 11 of the actual strategy, which I love the pictures and everything, by the way. I think strategies that are very well have got these pictures embedded in them are so much easier to read, and they're more user friendly. But anyway, page 12, your aims and ambitions, and I thought it was really interesting. You're saying there that you want to be in line with the good or outstanding authorities by 2022. Is that a very ambitious aim? I mean, we're not long away from 2022, are we? Those aims are absolutely brilliant, and obviously clearly where we'd like to be. And I just wondered where you were on the journey to thinking, yes, we actually have achieved that, please.
I would like to say, and I'm very ambitious in terms of this efficiency strategy. I would like us to reach our goals in terms of 2022, obviously realising that we're part way through 2021 now. And in terms of reaching those goals, work has already commenced in terms of the action plan. Our priorities and the actions below those priorities are already embedded within the plan. And as I've given an example earlier in terms of unregulated provision, we are stimulating and working with our residential market at the moment. We've seen 2 providers registering free homes within BCP so that they are able to accommodate our children in care locally, and that will see an increase of around about 7 to 10 beds locally within BCP. So that's a positive, and our work with adults and transitions for young people, not just those with a disability, but also on the SEND arena as well. I could talk all night, but I won't. But there are other excellent work that's going on behind the scenes, some of which is with our colleagues with health, some of which is with our colleagues in education and children's social care, and bringing all those partners to the table to meet these aims and ambitions that we've got. I'm more than happy to come back at a later date and share the progress that we've made, and we will obviously be doing an annual update around about January 2022 and as we go through the year.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, I would say that yeah, I'm getting the excitement feeling here, and I'd also share that Councillor Beverly Dunlop also wanted to make it clear that she thought it was a great document, and I think we can all agree with that. Sorry, Jane, do you want to come back at all? Or,
No, thank you very much. No, I think, Sarah, you've really answered that very well, and we look forward to seeing the update in due course. You know, as I say, it's a brilliant document, and well done. Congratulations.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes, I mean, I've just got a couple of questions to follow on sort of with what you were saying, Jane. I mean, well, first off, I'd love to see the development of the pleasures mentioned in there, because I know those of us who witnessed the pleasures happening from the young people, they were very moving, and it's nice to see that strand moving through. It's accommodation. I've said 6 studio flats, which I think is a great idea. The question is that the correct number and location, which is, and it's also the looking at the foster carers, because it says that most foster carers own their own property, which seems, but 63% nationally people own their own property. And I was wondering, is there anything that's being done or that we can do to allow people or encourage people who don't own their own property to become foster carers? Because I feel that might be a resource that could be tapped.
Thank you. I'll answer those in order. In terms of the 6 studio flats that we have, we've actually had those in place now for over 12 months. They are based in Wallisdown, and they have been a great success for the care experienced young people that have accessed those. The majority of the young people that have accessed them have sometimes been in points of crisis, and because they are supported within the properties and there are no timescales for them to move on, we really are helping them to prepare for that independence and that next step. And as we've developed the housing pathway for our care experienced young people over the last 6 months, what we're now seeing is a clear housing pathway for care experienced young people and transition through that pathway when they are ready. And it is about when their needs are being met and when they feel they're ready, rather than you know, they hit 18 and they need to move on. And that's what those flats have allowed us to do. We are working with our housing colleagues to develop our pathway and what that looks like, and that is yielding some success at the moment in terms of young people into their own accommodation and hold their own tenancy. So I hope that answers that point of your question.
I think we should just put the context, though, Sarah, that there is this is work that's happened recently, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. We do have legacy. You know, you'd all be familiar with the Focus visit last November, which was very, you know, very critical of our inability to plan. And that has meant that Sarah and the service have got poor legacy decision making for a number of young people between the ages of 16 and 18 that now do need accommodation. So we have inherited that, and it is a huge challenge. So what Sarah is talking about is that custom and practice change and that energy and that commitment, Councillor Kelly, to get to good and outstanding, but we have a legacy of a significant number of young people that need accommodation, their own tenancies, basically.
Mm.
I'm not wishing to dampen the energy. I'm just trying to be realistic about the challenge that sits behind.
So thank you, Elaine. You're quite right. And then the second point in terms of our foster carers and their housing situation, or the housing, I'm not in a position really to answer that at the moment. I think we'd need to reference colleagues in terms of their knowledge of the fostering market generally, and that would be our fostering manager and senior colleagues, and then obviously our colleagues in housing. What I can say is that our partnership with housing is very strong, and where we are looking at reunification of children in care to family members, and housing is a block, they are working with us to identify and be creative alongside us to allow that reunification to happen. But I'm more than happy to ask colleagues to come back to you on the matter of foster carers accommodation.
Thank you for that answer. I'm just looking around to see if there's any other hands. I don't think there are. I'll summarise in a minute, but I just want to check. I have a feeling I know the answer to this. The question is, are we happy to endorse a sufficiency strategy to cabinet? Anybody not happy to do that? I think is a better way of looking at it. No, in that case, I think we are very happy to do that. Just summing up what we talked about. We talked about unregulated provision, local provision and residential provision. We talked about capturing the voice of young people and youth parliament. We talked about national local drivers, number of BAME, dashboards on monitoring progress, but maybe not numerical process. Quality progress is I think is where we came at. We looked about becoming in line with good and outstanding authorities by 2022, which we all see is quite an ask, but we're hopeful for it. We talked about the accommodation either by the flats and foster carers. I don't think I've missed anything out there. I'm just looking around to see whether I've forgotten anything. In that case, we go on to, in my mind, the highlight of the evening, the portfolio holders update. I don't, Nicola, I know you've got some input here. I look at this more like the after dinner speaker. I hope you don't mind that. And Mike, you may be putting a bit of input in as well, but I imagine Nicola wants to go first. So over to you, Nicola.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't quite know how to respond, but I will leave the jokes and the raffle up to Mike to follow on with, if that's all right. Just a bit of a reflection. When you said, was there anything that I want to bring to the attention of the panel? In our correspondence, I did say it would rather depend really how the discussion went. And it's been a really interesting meeting. I do just sort of have a reflection really on all the discussions and the areas of interest that members and officers have displayed this evening. And there is, for me, actually emerging an absolute golden thread around inclusion. We are getting better at talking about it. We're better at recognising where we don't do it very well. And we're really, I think, beginning to understand the things that do work well and how we might get there to address them. And many of the things that have been looked at tonight through my portfolio, but for Mike's as well, touch on that. So we started, really the members' discussion started on a capital project and then reflected through the pressures in the high needs block and then through the improvement journey for SEND. And all those things are inextricably linked. And for me, the way that I've tried to articulate it is that what we are all collectively grasping for, but I think we're conscious that we've still got some way to go, is to have the most appropriate provision to meet the needs of the child close to home in order for them to grow up embedded in and supported by the local community. And they need to be visible and they need to be welcomed and they need to be valued. And I really thank members for the focus that they've given on quite a lot of that this evening. It's been quite a long meeting, so I won't go on too long after the coffee and the mints have arrived and before the final wrap up. But there have been a couple of really generous offers, and I really thank you for your enthusiasm. It started by Councillors Lewis and by Lisa and Fizz, apologies, old habits die hard around how to address committees. To them to say, they're saying, what can we do? How can we help? And that's always been the case with Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny. I'm really grateful for that. But what we can do, what we can all do, is make sure that we keep talking about this. We don't shy away from where it's not going well, but we embrace the fact that this is a huge agenda for us, and we all have the roles as community champions. And apologies, I'm speaking to the co-opted members of the committee as well, because you reach places that we can't. But certainly elected members, through their wards, through their connections and their links, can really help to take this forward. And I really look forward to coming back to you with Anthony at the conclusion of the work on the appreciative inquiry, because what that it's going to set out and say, right, as leaders for and advocates for children and young people, and that's what we all are, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to make it better? Let's start talking about it, but let's set ourselves, Beverly, some performance indicators and some metrics to make sure that we never take our eye off the prize on this. Thank you, Chairman. Now I hand over to Mike to draw the raffle.
No, sorry, no jokes, no raffle, no. I mean, the bottom line of a lot of what we're discussing, a very major improvement journey, and I really do appreciate the input from members this evening on a whole range of fronts. You've heard Ofsted is going to be keeping us really busy over the next few months. We could have a send inspection anytime. They could have come on Monday. They could easily come Monday next week or the Monday after. We have a focused inspection September, October, and a full inspection in the spring. So we have loads to do, and I really do appreciate your input and comments, and I think it's been a good meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, both of you, for that input. Now, there's a moment or two for questions here. I just have to say, I know my text has had a bit of a blink. I think everybody else has, but I think the raising hand function is still working, because I just tried it. So just go over to members. Are there any questions of the two portfolio holders? No, I'm not seeing any questions. I'm not seeing any hands raised here. I'm just, if anybody's trying to raise a hand and it's not working, wave at me at this point. Yeah. Okay, well, in that case, thank you very much. That was very informative. And there's no summary really to do on that, because I would hate to try to summarise what you both just said. So item 15, there's some items of information. So as you know, to try to keep these meetings slightly shorter, which is a slightly bizarre thing for me to say at this time of night, we have actually had some items which will be sending to you for information, which we circulated soon after the committee, so look out for those, and I'll be interested if anybody has any input to reply to me. Forward plan, are there any comments on the forward plan? We've had a couple of things added to them tonight. Has anybody got any comments about what's on the forward plan as written? No, I don't see so. In that case, next meeting, just note the dates. The next one we've already said is the 27th of July. 27th of July, yes. So in that case, thank you very much for attending for this long meeting. Thank you for everybody who attended online, and the meeting's over.